A group of disability rights advocates is taking the government to court, launching a charter challenge, arguing what's known as Track 2 of the MAID law has resulted in premature deaths. Well, my next guest is part of the coalition launching this challenge. Krista Carr is the Executive Vice President of Inclusion Canada, and she joins us tonight from Toronto. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So why have you chosen to be part of this coalition launching the charter challenge?
Because we expanded Canada's MAID law in 2021 to another track completely, to include people with disabilities who are not at the end of their lives, who are not otherwise dying. We have singled out one particular charter protected group of people for state-funded suicide when they are not terminally ill and not otherwise dying, and it has caused and is causing people with disabilities great harm, and many have already died when they did not want to be dying.
Okay, so let's get into a bit of the finer details here. In your opinion, how does Canada's assisted dying laws, how do they violate the charter?
Well, we have Track 1 MAID, which is not what we are challenging in our charter challenge. And it is the track that is available to anybody who's got a terminal illness, whose death is reasonably foreseeable, and who is suffering intolerably. But Track 2 MAID singles out one group of people, just people with a disability, and says that your life is not actually worth protecting or saving or even living, because when you are suffering intolerably, and we know that people with disabilities tell us over and over and over again that their intolerable suffering is not caused by their disability, it's caused by the hugely high rates of poverty they face, housing problems, lack of disability-related supports, institutionalization, social isolation, discrimination in society. That's what causes people with disabilities intolerable suffering. And rather than addressing those issues and giving people an equal right to live on an equal basis with others and have a good quality of life, we are instead offering them government-funded medical treatment in the form of a lethal injection that ends their lives, when what they're really seeking is support to live a good life in community.
I think you would agree that, you know, the community of people with disabilities is not monolithic. What would you say to those that are within that community that may have a different opinion than you, that want this option?
I think very often people with disabilities that say they want this option, what we hear, and we're 4 different disability organizations and 2 plaintiffs who themselves have a disability, is that people are constantly seeking and trying to get the support they need, and they're not getting it. And that is why some would want this option available. And so we say, the government has said, well, we're giving people their autonomy of choice, their autonomy rights. Well, what I can tell you is there's no autonomy and no autonomous choice when you're living in terrible conditions and you're being denied the supports you need to live, and you're homeless, or whatever the case may potentially be. And we're only singling out this special and fast track to death for one particular group of people who happen to be among the most marginalized in our society. Mm-hmm. And we're calling it an autonomous choice when it's really actually not a real choice. And we put limits on autonomy for people all the time. You know, government limits us when we want to drive recklessly on the roads, or drink and drive, or, you know, assault someone and cause bodily harm. Those things are against the law for a reason, because they are harmful. They're harmful to others. And what this particular track of medical assistance in dying has done has made it almost impossible for people to be safely interacting, people with disabilities to safely interact with the medical system, because we hear story after story after story about how they're being offered, suggested medical assistance in dying. In matter of fact, today in our press conference, Heather Walkus, who's a woman with 2 disabilities, who's the chair of the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, one of our partners in this, was telling a story about how she fell out of a taxi. She uses a wheelchair. She's blind. She fell out of a taxi and bruised her hip, went to a physiotherapist for support, and ended up being asked if she had considered MAID. Now, none of the rest of us would ever go to a physiotherapist for a bruised hip and be asked if we considered state-assisted death.
So ultimately, last question here, what do you want to see come out of this charter challenge? What is the outcome that you ultimately want here?
Well, we're challenging Track 2, medical assistance in dying, under Section 7 and Section 15 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and say that it violates those rights. We want it declared unconstitutional. So essentially what we're asking the court to do is to repeal Track 2 MAID, not the regular track for people who are terminally ill, but Track 2 MAID, and strike it from the law altogether.
Krista, appreciate your time and your perspective here on Canada Tonight. That is Krista Carr, who is the Executive Vice President of Inclusion Canada.